All right, let's talk about AI security. I know it can sound super complicated, but today we're going to break it down into a really simple, actionable plan. We're not just talking about code here. We're talking about building a digital fortress to protect your most valuable stuff. So you ready? Let's get started. So let me ask you this right off the bat. Is your AI application vulnerable to attack? It's a question every single person in this space has to be asking themselves. Because honestly, without the right defenses, that amazing AI you've built might just be a sitting duck. Let's look at what can happen when you leave the gates wide open. Okay, first up, there's this scary scenario called model kidnapping. Just imagine an attacker finds a little crack in your API and starts calling your model, not once, not twice, but millions of times. What's the result? Well, your server bill goes through the roof. We're talking about burning through your entire budget in maybe just a few hours. It's kind of like a stranger getting your Wi-Fi password and using it to download, I don't know, the entire internet. Ouch. Next on the list of nightmares, data scraping. This is where a competitor, maybe pretending to be a regular user, just systematically siphons out your entire knowledge base. Yeah, all those proprietary documents, all that data that gives you your edge, gone. Suddenly, your whole company's strategy is basically pasted on a public bulletin board for everyone to see. And then there's the PR disaster of what's called a privacy naked run. This is bad. If your AI logs get leaked, all that sensitive user data, we're talking private chat histories, order details, you name it, can be exposed to the whole world. The damage to public trust, it can be absolutely catastrophic. Just think of it like someone being able to read every single private message on your phone. Yeah, not good. And finally, the one risk that can just bring everything grinding to a halt: a lawsuit. You know, violating data protection laws isn't just a simple mistake, it's a huge legal liability. It can get your app yanked from the app stores and leave you with just massive, massive fines. These risks are totally real, and they demand a really structured defense. So to build our fortress, we need a solid blueprint, right? And that blueprint rests on three big pillars: security, privacy, and compliance. Now, I know people often throw these terms around like they're the same thing, but they're not. They're actually very distinct ideas that all have to work together to create a really solid defense. You know, the easiest way to get this is to think about it like building a house. So, security, that's your front door lock. It's the firewalls, the access controls, all the stuff you use to keep the bad guys out. Simple enough? Now, privacy, that's about what happens inside the house. It's like making sure your personal mail can't be opened by anyone else, using things like data anonymization. And compliance, well, that's just following the neighborhood rules, right? Like not building a fence that's too high. It's all about sticking to the laws, like GDPR. Okay, so here's the dead simple way to remember it. Ready? Security prevents bad guys. Privacy prevents misuse of data, even by people who are supposed to be there. And compliance prevents law breaking. And you absolutely positively need all three, because a breach in any one of these can bring the whole fortress crumbling down. All right, so let's start with the first layer of our fortress, the walls and the gates. This is all about access control. And the fundamental principle here is super simple. Everyone should only be able to do what they're supposed to do and nothing more, period. When we talk about access control, there are really two main models that dominate. First, you've got role-based access control, or RBAC. This one's pretty straightforward. It's all based on who you are. You know, your role, like an admin, an editor, or just a regular user. But then there's attribute-based access control, or ABAC, which is way more dynamic. It asks, what's your context? It looks at things like your department, the time of day, even your IP address, and a bunch more. So how does this actually play out in the real world? Well, RBAC is simple, it's fast, and that makes it pretty much perfect for startups. Think of it like having preset key cards for different types of staff. ABAC, on the other hand, is super flexible, really granular, but yeah, it's more complex to set up and it can have a higher performance cost. It's really the top choice for big enterprises in sensitive fields, think finance or government, where you need to check a bunch of different conditions before you let anyone in. Okay, so once we've figured out who can get in, we need to protect the treasure inside our fortress, the data itself. And this is huge because large language models have an incredible memory. If they're trained on sensitive data, they might just spit it right back out to an attacker. The goal here is to train a model that learns the patterns, not one that memorizes all your secrets. To protect data during training, we can call on what I like to call the three musketeers of data privacy. First up, there's data desensitization. This is basically like putting a digital blur or mosaic over any sensitive info. Then you have differential privacy, which is a seriously powerful mathematical trick that adds just enough noise to the data to protect individuals. And finally, there's federated learning, which is a real game changer. It trains the model without the data ever having to leave the device it's on. Pretty cool, right? So how do you pick which one to use? Well, it all comes down to trade-offs. Data desensitization is definitely the easiest to implement, but it only gives you kind of moderate privacy. Differential privacy, that gives you the strongest, mathematically proven protection you can get. But man, it is difficult to get right and can sometimes mess with the data quality. And federated learning offers amazing privacy by keeping data local, but it's super complex and pretty costly to set up. It's also super important to remember that data is vulnerable throughout its entire life cycle. When it's in transit, zipping across the network, it can be intercepted. When it's in use, sitting in your system's memory, it can be scanned. And when it's just at rest on a hard drive, well, the whole disk could be stolen. Each one of these stages needs its own specific defense. Now, for any SaaS platform that's serving multiple customers or tenants, keeping their data separate is absolutely key. You can go for physical isolation. That's giving each customer their own server, like a detached house. It's the most secure option, but also, you guessed it, the most expensive. Or, on the other end, you could use logical isolation. This is where all your customers share the same database, and they're only separated by a little tenant ID tag. It's kind of like beds in a youth hostel. Super cheap, but also pretty risky. For most companies, a semi-physical model usually hits that sweet spot in the middle. All right, we're on to the final part of building our fortress: obeying the law of the land and setting up the watchtowers. This means making sure you're compliant with all the legal regulations and actively monitoring your systems for any funny business. And look, this isn't just a good idea, it's a legal requirement. And you have to know that different parts of the world have different rules. In China, you've got the 3 laws that govern cybersecurity, data security, and personal info. Over in Europe, the GDPR is kind of the gold standard for the whole world, with core ideas like data minimization and the right to be forgotten. Any AI application that wants to be global has to figure out how to navigate these really complex legal waters. And just so we're clear, the stakes for getting this wrong are staggering. A serious GDPR violation isn't just a slap on the wrist. The fine can be up to 4% of a company's annual global turnover. Let that sink in. For a big tech giant, that could literally be billions of dollars. It's a number that can seriously threaten the existence of even the biggest companies out there. So, to prove you're compliant and to track everything that's happening, you need rock-solid audit logs. It's non-negotiable. A best-in-class way to do this is the 5 Ws and 1 R model. For every single critical action, you have to be able to trace who did it, when they did it, where they did it from, what exactly they did, to which resource, and what the result was. Trust me, when an investigator comes knocking, this traceability is your absolute best friend. And look, when a breach does happen, because let's be real, no fortress is 100% perfect, you need to have a clear plan. This 5-step process is the industry standard. First, you discover the incident. Then you assess the damage, contain the threat to stop it from spreading, notify the regulators and your users within the legal time limit, and finally, you remediate the root cause so it never, ever happens again. So after all this work, after building the walls, securing the treasury, and setting the laws, we're left with one final, really critical question. You've built your fortress. Who are you giving the keys to? Because at the end of the day, security isn't just about technology, it's about trust and responsibility.